What we can ask China to lead the evolution of Asia, perhaps in the way Germany did, ultimately that of Europe. But China will not be orchestrated. You must give her its due. Less still should China be treated like the Soviet Union at the end of World War II, as a country that needs to be contained. Bottom line, treat China as the main leader of Asia. Yes, how would others feel? How would others feel? This is where China comes in. I'll come back to that. The rivals. There are other countries with interests in Asia, formidable ones. Of course, when I met Bill Emmons last year, I said, you missed out one country there. I wasn't referring to Australia, I was referring to Indonesia. And he said, yeah, I had written it, I write it again, I will put Indonesia in. But these countries have their own interests. And obviously those outside the country, the contiguous countries, the Asia-Pacific region, have an interest to engage with these countries to come up with an architecture that they want. And here there could lie a problem, in how the diplomacy is managed and who speaks for whom. But I think there is a platform on which to effect regional cooperation involving major countries from the rest of the world, even if it is an economic forum, the G20. Of course, people already have many criticisms of the G20, but it could form the base of wider functional regional integration if the spirit of inclusion could be injected into the summit process by the 6 Asian member countries of the G20. And I include Australia in the 6. The question that has appropriately been asked is, can Asia collectively strengthen its voice in the G20? How could it do so? And there has been suggestions made in some writings. One, formalize and regularize the participation of ASEAN, which has been invited as an observer. In fact, the first time it was invited as an observer because Gordon Brown was impressed with Abhisit when they met the first time around. And then Abhisit was invited to the London summit, the London G20 in March of 2009. So, formalize and regularize the participation of ASEAN. Now, meetings of the ASEAN plus 3, i.e. ASEAN plus China, Japan, and Korea, expanded just prior to G20 summits to include India, Australia, and New Zealand, and then to also include the US and Russia, who recently, the Malaysian Prime Minister feels should be brought into the EAS, which is the East Asian Summit, as they fulfill the criteria met by Australia, New Zealand, and India. So we have ASEAN plus 3, plus 3, plus plus. Full circle, better for Asian collective strength. Will it be collected? It is something worth working on. And the views and positions of other Asian countries, not included in this group. And this is something George Yeo, the Foreign Minister of Singapore, has been working hard on. The views and positions of other Asian countries, as well as those other developing countries, from other regions, to be included in this consultative process, feeding into the G20. So, if Asia could orchestrate, achieve this, it will be seen as truly inclusive-minded, which is a new lead away from present exclusive arrangements. Although, of course, you would have noticed in all this talk, there's been no mention of Europe, but Europe can take care of itself. Finally, in this final section, I would say ideas matter, I had mentioned earlier. Ideas are a foundation for action. And we all know, and nobody better than you, about the power of ideas. And you would know also about Martin Jake's rather controversial book. But the central thesis of the book, forget about time and whether it will happen and China will or will not rule the world, but one fundamental thesis of the book is that China will not only rule the world, but also rule the mind. We're talking about the value system, talking about a completely different cultural reality. It's not just China coming in, replacing the United States, but it's going to be a different way of doing things, completely based on different cultural values, it will be transformation for the world we live in, and completely different from what we know of it today, and all the assumptions we make about it. It could be a totally different world, and most things would be different from what we know today. The Chinese world, if you like, it would indeed be rather different. It was completely Chinese world. So, will this happen? Now, I don't think so. However much Martin thinks, it will happen. Now, we talk about, say, the K economy, the knowledge economy, but even before and behind the K economy lies knowledge as a power to dominate. Now, the supply of knowledge is a streamed enterprise. Whoever controls that supply and its underlying assumptions has tremendous power, starting with intellectual power. Unlike Nine, who identifies soft power as a companion in arms of hard power, I would identify the soft control of knowledge as fundamental to the exercise of all power. You have the power to define the parameters to any issue, solution. You have the power to determine what are the major issues within those parameters, and the power to decide which is the best and most rational way to go. And this comes from universities, media, books, etc. And these are the instrumentalities. The important point is control over content, which defines, determines, and decides for us what is right, what is rational, and what should be the choice. Now, this intellectual code is the elemental basis of control, of thought and action in society. This is most evident in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, for example, financial tradition, most seen in the great financial crisis of 2008. What did happen after the crisis? This power to say that these were the reasons and these were the issues, and those are not the reasons and those are not the issues. What was it? We concentrated on management issues, primarily risk management, but not control failures, regulation, activities of market players, the reward system. We didn't want to concentrate on it. We were led away from it. And those who achieved failure came back to us in Asia with the language of how to manage success. We invite them to talk about how to manage our financial systems. Now, what is emphasized is the continued exercise of the power of the market, which means continued exercise of power in the market by those who control that power, countries, institutions, and individuals, to the point that when it comes to a conflict, e.g. the power of distribution of credit in various financial systems, even in the West, the guys will not distribute credit if there was too much state intervention in their activities, despite the fact that the state rescued the banks and ensured that they survived. This is a kind of power that is so strong, both intellectually and then in its exercise in the distribution of credit and financial control. So far, the Anglo-Saxon tradition continues to reign supreme because this crisis of Western capitalism is still a crisis within, not yet a crisis against a countervailing system. To this extent, while Francis Fukuyama, you remember, the end of history, had to retreat from his end of history in his other recent book, but more recent book, in its political and military sense, it might be argued that his thesis still holds sway in finance and the economy. Now, would the rise of Asia be the beginning of change in the fundamental intellectual process and its various expressions and realization in important fields of human endeavor, politics, economy, finance, lifestyle, fashion, and so on. Would it happen? If it does not, can we say that this, or whenever it may be, is the Asian century? Indeed, without this elemental intellectual pole, is it likely that we can even arrive at such a point? Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, let me say, Asia is no doubt on the ascendant economically. There are even more millionaires in Asia than in Europe now, according to Merrill Lynch. But it is by no means dominant and the prime mover of the world economy, not yet. It will progressively become more significant, and it will play an important role in global economic management, a process which has already started with the G20. Major Asian economies are now part, if you like, remember those days of the concert of powers in Europe, part of the concert of powers in the world economy. But their effectiveness still remains to be seen, and they have to organize themselves better. See how the EU, the European Commission, presents and prepares papers for various conferences and conducts consultations in the presentation of papers. Compare it with what ASEAN does in preparation of such papers and in consultation in the preparation of such papers. And you can see the different quality in the movement of ideas to achieve desired ends between the two. We still have to improve a heck of a lot. As I said, expression of that power in geopolitical terms is anticipated, but Asia is not united in this. And interested parties not strictly part of Asia will still play a significant role in the determination of the contours and purposes of regional architecture and institutions. There are dangers of power play against China, not least the danger of it being self-fulfilling. An astute and sensitive management of geopolitical change management we hear about so much in this world in terms of companies and corporates, political change, geopolitical change, management of change, geopolitical change, with genuine recognition of the rise of Asia and China would spare the world the grief of dangerous tension that characterized the immediate World War II years, or indeed the interwar years in Europe. There is, of course, finally a disparity of growth and interest among Asian countries, which could be exploited. But there's a chance for Asian countries to show the way to better consultation in the management of world affairs. Not only this, the often proclaimed Asian values could also inform discussion and solution of many global problems, especially those, as I mentioned, in finance and economy, even if it is not likely that there will be a seismic shift in the intellectual ground in intercourse in international society. Unless, of course, China comes to rule the world in a unilateral fashion, which even America has done. Nevertheless, there will be, and that's not likely to happen, nevertheless, there will be a new gravitational pull of China against which the world's other major power will have to compete. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pansui, for a very stimulating and, may I say, thought-provoking and enlightening speech. We very much appreciate that you have come from KL to present the Santos Keynote and make a very valuable contribution to our 18th ASLA conference. I'm very pleased to announce that Pansui is able to take a few questions from the floor. So please raise your hand. We have Lynn with the microphone. And please identify yourself and keep your question as short as possible. Thank you.